Hey everybody, what's up? It's your boy MJ. Welcome to the Black Wine Guy Experience. My guest today is the co-founder and winemaker of Brewer-Clifton, Greg Brewer. Greg started his career as a French instructor at UC Santa Barbara before being trained in wine production at the Santa Barbara Winery in 1991. He created Brewer-Clifton with original partner Steve Clifton in 1996. And Greg was also instrumental in designing Melville Winery, where he worked as winemaker from its inception in 1997 through 2015. And in 2020, Greg was named Winemaker of the Year by Wine Enthusiast magazine. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited and honored to be here.
I could tell you, you guys have seen the outtakes. We just did a Before the Pours, like one of the longest. It was so fun. We should have booked 3 hours, but Greg's so busy. So we got to get this in. But I tell you, it's going to be a lot of laughs, and I'm super excited you're here, man. Thank you. Thank you. Tell everybody about the wines you brought and you shipped in for the show.
Sure. So first I brought something from Brewer-Clifton, 2008 Chardonnay from Sandford and Benedict vineyard. So Sandford and Benedict, Richard Sandford gave birth to what would become our appellation. And this vineyard was established and planted in my birth year. I was born in 1970. And we only worked with it 1 year in 2008. It's the only time we've done an S&D. And I thought, the excitement for the show, respect for you, your roots in Santa Barbara, I wanted to do something very kind of grounded and historic as a thank you, to you to do that. And 2008 was an interesting year. It was a cold year. We got some frost, whatever. But emotionally, it was really important to me to have this with you. So thanks for bringing it.
Oh, my God. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I said this. I had Oscar Henquet, who works at Rita State. He's the manager director. And I did a clip. I was like, let's stop all the bullshit. California wines are age-worthy whites and reds. If they're made right, and this is made right. I had the pleasure of being at a dinner in my honor in Paso Robles. And Greg and his wife, Sonia, who's also a winemaker, makes incredible wines under her labels of the Feminist Party and
Casa du Metz
and
Clementine Carter.
Yeah. I didn't know they're coming, so surprised me and came up, and it was amazing because it was after some of us got vaccinated so we could go around, and it was April and it was a little chilly, but they had heaters and we're up on this roof and and it's at a castle, and Greg and Sonia show up and they're looking like they came fucking out of LA, like there's a red carpet and they're walking like a rock star couple, and they're like, oh my God. And I knew of Greg. Greg's busy, but I know Steve a little bit better. We'll get into that. But Sonia I had connected with over Zoom in the pandemic, and I interviewed her and just lovely. So that was and you brought a 2011, and this is in Paso Robles, and we had like Eric Booker there. We had people from we had my man Stanley from Top, winemaker from Immersi was there. So we're talking Paso's big red blends. Everybody, the wine of the night was your Chard. So
I went kung fu on that stuff.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm not gonna roll with that in the red world.
Yeah,
no, so old white. That was a no-brainer.
Yeah. And killed it. And so to have an even older wine, and to your point, the first time I visited Santa Barbara before I moved out there in '99, one of the places we did was Sandford, and we went to Sandford and Benedict, and and that was a thing. We'll get into it, but so thank you so much is what I'm saying for bringing this incredible, and it's great acidity. It's unctuous, but it's got acid, and the color. It's got a lot more life ahead of it for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Connecticut. Yeah, I was born in New Haven.
Oh,
I know you went to school in New Haven.
Yeah.
Yeah. So born at Yale. And then they never let me back. But we'll birth you, and then it's like one-way street. Yeah, the door's locked. So born at Yale when my dad was finishing his PhD, and then we moved out to LA. And my dad got a job at the Rand Corporation. This is 1970, so kind of that wargaming kind of. Yeah. And so that was his thing.
What was his PhD in?
It was like management and kind of. A lot of it was.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing because, and I learned this. I didn't go to Yale, but I don't even act like I do. I just leave it hanging. I'm like, yeah, I went to school in New Haven
for sure.
And I let people just think about it. They're like, MJ's kind of smart. Yeah, he must have went to Yale
for sure.
But when you hang out, like like the whole think tank world.
Yeah, that
Like
was
they
them.
like and defense world. They just snatch smart people. So
Yeah.
obviously your dad was
and
very
that
smart.
era,
yeah,
dude.
yeah,
like
yeah.
Paisley sideburns, like pre-computers, like punching cards.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of like old school, like underground Rand Corporation stuff. Yeah. So anyway, that's what brought us out to the West Coast.
Okay.
And then my folks divorced when I was 4. Dad went back to Yale. He taught there. He went to some other spots, but basically at Yale for the better part of 40 years. Yeah, and I was raised in Pacific Palisades, which is this really, now it's a really kind of beautiful bougie coastal town. And it was a great place to grow up. It was a little more chill. It was a little more kind of hippie, funky, like beach town back then.
Right. That's like on the out on one of the part of the end of the bay, right?
Kind of. Well,
Kinda.
Palos Verdes is that.
Palos
It
Verdes,
gets
okay.
convert. Yeah, it's between Santa Monica and Malibu, just south of Malibu.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay.
And it was great. And then it was my older sister, who's 6 years older, and myself and my mom. And mom worked. She after the divorce, she worked during the day. She got a job as a secretary at Rand Corporation, and she always wanted to be a DA. I mean, that was like her dream. She was a speech major in college, and then she had this dream of being a DA. So she put herself through law school at night at Southwestern, like downtown LA. And so we're very much like the quintessential latchkey 70s kids, where, we lived on a cool street, but like, mom came home at like 10 at night. She went to work at 5 in the morning, came out at 10 at night, and we're all good. I was like, my sister, when she went to college, I was 11. So I was like 11, just chilling by myself. But it was like, we lived like raccoon. I mean, it was like you're on the street and you kind of eat food where you find it,
Right.
you play football, and like, but like everyone was everywhere. Like parents never knew where we were. It was so funny. And that was it. But that, most importantly, during that era, I was, around someone I felt so loved, and I found I was raised by someone who was defined by her work. It was just driven by her work, and she became a DA in Ventura. And her specialty was sexual assault and minors
stuff,
and
yeah.
predatory. I mean, the darkest of the darkest. But she, her life's drive was defending those victims, and it was really, seeing the identity that could be forged by one's profession was formidable. I mean, that's kind of why I am who I am, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think what's really important about that is finding who you are in your work, or because we are like people. Like people joke about, like when you meet someone at a bar, if you're saying like, "What do you do?" That's like that's like, "Oh, what do you do?" Like
Right.
that is the question. Like, and so I think you're really, like you said, very blessed, very fortunate to have seen someone who knew, or at least in her heart, this is what she was here to do,
Yeah.
and she did it. So that what that imparted to you later in life, I'm sure was invaluable.
Super invaluable. It was amazing, and someone like chasing a dream and kind of, I'll say against all odds. That sounds cheesy, but it wasn't straightforward. You know what I mean? And the law school thing, and just the grit and stamina and perseverance to do that. Raising young kids and figuring it out. It's real.
I mean, single mom, so much stigma probably in the 70s then, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, and like you said, the drive and the perseverance, and we said there can be collateral damage, but I'm impressed. That's very impressive. Because I went to law school. That shit's not fun or easy. So you got to really want to do it.
Yeah. And even though being at work or at school and then working, she always felt there for me at the same time, which is a cool thing too. I think in life you don't always have to be there you don't have to call someone 50 times a day to have their back.
Yep.
And so I always, so anyway, it was, we all have our ways of growing up and we all have different twists and turns, but no regrets. It was awesome.
So it's obviously she worked a ton. Were your parents ever into wine? Like when you go with your father, was he drinking wine out on the East Coast? Was that a thing?
Oh yeah, so that was so awesome. So my dad and stepmom, it was a very different situation. So in LA, it was like, we kind of like I ate like bread and drank Coke. I mean, like it was mac and cheese and stir and frost cakes. I mean, I ate like potato. I mean, like I had like no food at all. I didn't know seasons existed. I mean, I was like this random LA kid. Yeah. And then my dad and Shelly, my stepmom, completely opposite. It was beautiful. Connecticut, like super farm to table, like, getting bluefish and stuff. Like we'd catch and bring it in, and neighbors grew tomatoes, and every night was like sitting down, and I learned how to set a table. They always had wine on the table. I always tasted it. I didn't really know what was going on, but all tasted good. I was like 10. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh yeah, yum, yeah. Awesome. So it was a very different life, and I love, especially as I've gotten older, I've loved that duality. that New England, East Coast, and that kind of culinary wine thing, really, with them. And then back at home in LA, it was just not that, So it was like a double life in some ways. It was cool.
That is cool. That's very cool. So you're an LA kid, kind of bi-coastal. Where did you attend college?
So I went to school at UC Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And it was funny because I applied to like 11 schools, whatever. And it was so funny because I always thought, I did partying in high school, and I'd be like, oh, I can always go to Yale. I dropped the thing because Dad was still there. Yeah, it turns out I didn't get in, but it was funny. And like the first two schools I got into was UC Santa Barbara and Boulder, which are kind of similar in some ways, I think. And I'm like, oh, I'm 2 for 2. Check me out. And then I went like 2 for 11. Yeah, I got to know from all the others. And then it was between the two, and literally it was very pragmatic. It was like both would have been neat. I was a cyclist, I was like, oh, I could like ride in the mountains, and that's cool. And then it was just tuition. It was like, oh gosh, like UC, I'm a California kid, so why spend that much more? It was way less than it is these days. Nonetheless, it made sense. And so UC Santa Barbara, that was my thing. And always French. Like I had a great teacher in high school, Mr. Johnson. Yeah. LA Unified, public school. Incredible. He's cool. I mean, and so he inspired me to teach and French and everything else. And so I knew I'd be a French major. I knew I wanted to teach French.
So you actually majored in French?
From out of the gates, dude.
Wow.
Like it wasn't like a last minute thing. Like I was 12 and like, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Initially anyway. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I have how I ended up in Santa Barbara was I have a buddy who went to UC Santa Barbara. You were probably there. You guys had to be there at the same time.
Yeah, I was 87 to 91.
Yeah,
Taught there in 91.
Cliff Korn, he works at Acker. And Cliff,
of course.
Cliff and I worked at. He's the one who got me the job at the Wine Bistro. I was like, you guys had it.
Of course.
And so Cliff is from New York, and this I love this because you like. It's so cool. Like you wanted to get to Yale, but like Cliff like had went around to all these schools with his dad, and they rolled up at UCSB. And if you guys Ivy, it's like there's these bluffs and
it's crazy.
It's just crazy. and he's there with his dad, and he's like, and the girls and Calvert. He's like, if you don't go here, son, you're stupid.
It's true. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, and on top of the beauty of it, like you said, they've got professors who win all those awards. Like it's like it's a very like we know our Ivy League schools here on the East Coast, and the Ivies are the Ivies, but like those UC schools just attract just as much academic talent.
Oh, for sure, those do. I love the city college route. I mean, if I were doing it all over again, I mean, those what you can get for free or close to free these days, that kind of education, people that really want to teach and be there. Phenomenal. And the fact that sometimes overlooked is really, but even my dad, he was like, a lot of professors that are kind of easing into retirement, a lot are like posting up in places like San Diego, Santa Barbara,
whatever, so they go out west.
Oh yeah.
I worked at Yale and Princeton, and I want some better weather. They're not going to be like, no, you can't come to our university. Yeah. We'll have you. Yeah. So you said you cycled. So and also like when I moved out to California, the crazy club sports. Was there a cycling team at UCSB, or you would just ride on your own?
Yeah, I was on the triathlon team. We kind of started one at the beginning. Yeah,
right.
I did triathlons in high school, and then I've always loved. I'm kind of a solo person in a lot of ways. I've realized about myself. So running, cycling, and Santa Barbara's great for it. So I was kind of on this like pseudo triathlon team at the beginning, and then just doing stuff on my own. Nothing formal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
okay.
Nothing formal. Yeah.
All right, so I don't want to assume, but you seem like somebody who would be on the 4-year plan, not like the 6-year plan, like me and some of my friends. So what was your first, you majored in, you were going to be a French professor, major in French. Was your first job teaching at UCSB, or did you work somewhere else?
No, so here's the deal. So in my junior year, I moved to France. So I did a year abroad in the French Alps in Grenoble, and it was amazing. I worked in Belgium for a summer at a department store. It was great. And then the year in France was awesome. And then senior year, fine. And then my original plan was to teach high school French.
Okay.
And so I got into the credential program at UCSB. I was a bit young, so I graduated. I was barely 21. And then and I got into that, and it wasn't feeling right. Like unfortunately, French is being phased out of a lot of schools because there's just not a need.
Well,
for
I mean,
it,
now
right?
I studied French in high school and to college, and I don't speak any except un peu, je ne sais pas, Pliny Montrachet. um, but yeah, there's a part of me is like, because when I moved to California, I was like, you should study Spanish because Spanish is what. And now, so you have Spanish and you have like Chinese and Japanese, like Asian language have become more important. Korean, all those
For
things,
sure, yeah. So I didn't see many opportunities kind of down the road, and then also, part of the early couple of weeks of that credential program, there was a lot of discourse around, being a role model and almost like replacing, being there to kind of fill a void of maybe things lacking in people's families' lives and whatever. And I was like, I'm 21. Like, I wasn't quite ready for that, and I recognized that in myself. And so I remember meeting with another professor in the department, this woman who's really sweet, Catherine, and she said, well, why don't you get a master's with us, and you'll have an office and teach here, and you make $1,000 a month. And I was like, wow, okay. And so I got right into the master's program in French Lit. And the teaching part was the best. I loved it so much. I gave everything I had to it because in foreign language in a university, like you're the only teacher. You're not a TA. No offense to a TA, but like there's frequently when you're a grad student, there's like a professor. Seminar, and you have a breakout.
Right.
In foreign language, you're it. Like I was a 4-unit course at UCSB, and I was a 21-year-old living in a frat house. But so I gave all I could to teaching, and then the research side. I was on academic probation, right? Because I was living in the fraternity house. I'm drinking malt liquor. I mean, I was an Isla Vista at 21. I mean, I wasn't a grad student. I mean, that was never part of the plan.
Right.
And so I kind of muscled my way through for a year, and then I got into the tasting room gig, and then obviously off I went.
Yeah. So I was going to ask about that. So that's so funny. For you guys at IV drinking malt, like I could just see her.
Listening to reggae, watching people play foosball, it was good.
So early 90s shit.
I peaked.
So 1991-ish, you started in the tasting room at Santa Barbara Winery, is that?
Yeah.
And that was down in Montecito?
In the Funk Zone. So right downtown in Santa Barbara. Okay. So it was literally, I was in the fraternity house and watching people play. I wasn't even playing foosball. It was like spectator foosball. Right. And there was an ad in the Independent or News Press, and it was like this big. It was Santa Barbara Winery, no experience necessary, willingness to learn, $5.50 an hour. And I was like, dude, what? Work at a winery, $5 an hour? Like crackers, give tours, drink wine. I'm like, that'd be so cool. And I'm like, I speak French. I got game. Easy. So I rolled down there, probably a little bit hot. I got this in the bag. And it was really funny. Layla, the manager at the time, she asked me a question about Chardonnay. I'll never forget this. And I lived in France. So I knew about Beaujolais. I knew about I knew some regions of France, Bordeaux, whatever. But I didn't know in the U.S. that it was things were named after the grape. And it was about Chardonnay, and I fumbled. And there was another woman who applied, who knew that, whatever. So she outdid me. And so she got the gig, and I was so bummed because when I walked in the winery, the smell, the barrels, Pierre Lafond, it was like black tie. It was like gourmet food for the time, crackers and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I have to be here. I'm really driven, and so when I want something, almost to a fault, I lock in, and so I followed up, letters, flowers, knocking on the door. I mean, I was that guy. And she called me a few weeks later, and someone else fortunately had given notice. I was their second candidate, and I was like, good enough for me to get in the door. Mm-hmm. And then one day behind that bar, I knew this would be my life. Yeah, it was immediate. Yeah, unwavering, immediate. Everything about the craft was it was it for me.
So I always think this is funny because every 10, 15, 20 years, the Wine Spectator will come out with the hottest new wine region. Talk a little about Santa Barbara Winery, the pioneering of we know. We're going to get to, we talked about Richard Sandford, but let's talk about Santa Barbara Winery, Pierre Lafond, kind of what they did for how they helped jumpstart things in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, for sure. So Pierre Lafond, who sadly just passed away, in 1962, he's the oldest commercial post-prohibition winery in the county. Very discreet, super low key, and the full winery was downtown in Santa Barbara when it was funky and random and it was warehousey, and started off making fruit wines, and then planted the Santa Barbara Winery Vineyard in '72. It was right after Sandford and Benedict, right down the street. Mm-hmm. And then Bruce McGuire, who's still there, who trained me, he started in '81. But that was it. I mean, it started off.
McGuire flashback.
Yeah,
wow.
Dude, 41 years he's been there. That's a long pull.
Yeah,
it's really admirable and so low key, gentle, steady. humble as can be. It's really a beautiful man. And that's a whole nother. Him taking me on was just a gift of a lifetime. But we're talking about like fruit wines. It was like a lullaberry wine, and like people forget these days, how fast this trajectory has been. Wine's been around for a bazillion years, right?
Yep.
And I'm sure you've had people on the podcast, where it's like Pepe Reventos, people where it's like, 1497.
Yeah.
I mean, like crazy old,
Right.
real
Right.
stuff.
Like ridiculous.
That kind of stuff. And in our area, it's 50 plus years. It's like zero time. It's like the opposite of dog years.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like zero time. And we're going from like, I know someone who makes hot tubs. Like I can ferment in that, and I'll make some lullaberry wine. To now, it's a very different landscape, and I'm prideful. It's been really beautiful to be kind of second generation.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because there was like Sandford and Bon Climat, Coupe, Ojai, Santa Barbara. I mean, Brander.
Yep.
The real pioneers.
Yep.
And then I'm like leg 2 or 3 even of the relay.
Yeah.
And so it's been neat to kind of, they set the template and they proved it all. And then it's just been kind of refinement, doing the best I can by them.
Mm-hmm.
And then now really being mindful of, setting up the next, for success,
Yep.
For all of us.
Yep.
It's really,
Yep.
it's been a beautiful time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you start in a taste room. Bruce McGuire takes you under his wing. What was like your next job? Like, were you tasting room and like, what was your next gig? Cellar rats?
Yeah. So I worked, it was like summers. I didn't teach on Thursdays, so it's like weekend summers. Yeah,
Okay.
kind of. I love the educational piece. Again, people come to the bar. And I also immediately was aware of the fear and permission that people bring to wine and the intimidation. Think about in wine how frequently the word should is employed. When should I drink this? What should I drink it at? What temperature should I? What should I eat with it? Right? And so I was like, wow, like it's people. Wine freaks people out. And as soon as I learn more about it, I can neutralize some of that insecurity. I can kind of like embolden themselves. I can kind of bolster up their confidence. So I love that. And so that was it. And then during the harvest time, they let me like scrub a tank, like foot stomp something. And so that was like 91. That was pretty early on.
Yep.
And then getting into the end of 92, I knew that I was not happy in grad school, and I shouldn't have been there. I was on probation. I mean, I was like on the brink of being kicked out anyway. And then I knew Bruce's assistant was leaving, and I asked to have like lunch with him, whatever. We sat in the little patio there. And I said, how much I know or how much I don't know. But you know how I work. You know how committed I am to this. Please, if you'd consider giving me a shot. And I'll never forget, he's like, production isn't pretty. And I was like, and it's like gentle, dry tone. And he gave me a shot. I didn't know how to siphon water out of a bucket. I didn't know how to use a crescent wrench. I mean, I didn't. And like my first day at work, I was like filtering Riesling. I mean, he taught me how to hook up a hose. I mean, everything, like 99% of everything I do now is a result of and an outcome of his kindness in his instruction, really. It was a beautiful situation. And back then, too, other people would hang out. There weren't that many wineries. Like, 15 wineries back then? It wasn't that many. And so Chris Whitcraft was around all the time because he made wine right down the street. And he was best friends with Bert Williams from Williams Sallium. So I'm 21, 22, 23. Wine Cask is blowing up. Like, Bert Williams and Chris are hanging out. Like, it was an amazing time to be that sponge and just taking in all this, and the open channels of communication from those people is invaluable. I mean, it was it for me. That was my schooling, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why I love this shit, right? Like you could know people, but like to get your story, like Chris Whitcraft, when we were at Acker, we brought some of the first wines from Santa Barbara. We were the first people to bring Chris Whitcraft wines into. Chris Whitcraft was this amazing. Well, he's an amazing winemaker, but his Burgundian shit was Burgundian.
Yeah.
And Bert Williams, but Williams' son was Garage East. Was that bigger, but they were buddies, and they would. There is that synergy of when I think there's a kinship of winemakers, particularly when you're still small. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, what are you doing? What's working for you?
100%.
Taste this. What do you think? It's not as competitive as other things can be.
Yeah.
Which is nice. And then, what'd you say? I love. It'll come back to me. But like, that you're part of the second wave. That's pretty amazing because that was the thing when I moved to Santa Barbara. It was just starting to come up. But there have been people for years.
And the thing of it is too, if I can just jump in one more time,
please.
Like with, I mentioned Wine Cask. I mean, our logo is taken from the ceiling of the restaurant of Wine Cask. I mean, the Wine Cask is like
Doug Marjoram. Shout out to Doug.
For sure. Doug,
Marjoram Wines.
Yeah, it was incredible. And that that restaurant and that retail store was, and the wine bistro too, but like Wine Cask was just an incubator.
No, it was
an incubator.
because they were downtown.
It was
so
ground
it was
zero,
it was
dude. Like
totally.
the restaurant,
Yeah.
and David Zucchini was chef, and their Wine Futures program was my school.
Oh man, the Santa Barbara Wine Futures
that was
tasting,
my school.
That was bomb.
Yeah, dude. And so I'm 23, this is like 93, 4 or 5, like right before Brewer-Clifton. And I remember, like, I'd read about these people in magazines, and I'd meet them, and they were like friends, right? Clendenin and Bert, whatever. And then I remember, like, the catalog would come out, and I swear to God, I would know when the catalog was dropping for like the Futures program. I would sleep on this, almost like sleep on the sidewalk, like I'm waiting for police tickets, and like outside like the warehouse record store. Yeah. And then like they'd open the box, and I would like bike home or drive home, and I would like memorize it because it was like, it was all Tally, Ojai, ABC, Coupe, Sandford, and it was like, they were doing this, half new oak, this barrel maker, picking this, stainless steel, blocking mallow, whatever, stem inclusion. And I'd like read it, and then like I wanted to learn so bad that it wasn't even memorizing; it was just like digesting.
Yeah.
And then you go to the tasting, and they're all pouring, and you're like you know what they did, and then you taste through it, and it was like, and that was it. That was my whole training was that, and it was real, and it was current, and it was like the people doing it were there, and they always had my back. Bruno, I mean, they're big brothers. No, I mean
I love Bruno, yeah.
They've always had my back.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful. And again, the community is great now there, and when anything gets bigger. Things just change.
Things change.
And when things are tiny, you picture like an immigrant
Yep.
village or something. When there's 4 people,
Right.
you have each other's back in different ways. I think, and it was that feeling back then,
and
that I appreciated,
that maverickness, we're doing something almost disruptive.
Very much so.
That bonds you together. I totally get that. So, all right, so 91, you're working in the taste room. 96, you get this crazy idea to start making your own wine. How did that happen?
Yeah, so that was it. So it was funny. I met Steve Clifton. I was the winemaker for about a year and a half at a place called Sunstone. So I was there.
I remember Sunstone.
Clifton was at Rancho Sisquoc, and then he was, and then he went over to Beckman. When
These
Beckman
are all
started.
these are names like that are all Rancho Sisquoc. These are all a lot of people in New York. These are all Santa Barbara. Like if you're not in the area, you're not gonna know about these.
And it was funny. So, like I was saying, everyone was so nice. Rick Longoria. I mean, all these people were so nice, but it was very much a different generation, right? So, it was like people that were raised in like the 50s and 60s, right? So it was very much like, I don't want to say jeans, flannel shirt, hippie, whatever, but it was a little bit more of that, right?
Yeah.
And everyone was so nice. I was a bit younger, and I didn't quite. And then I met Steve, and Steve, he's a few ticks older than I am, but it was very much like a product of the 80s, right? I mean, it was him more than me, as far as like clubs, eyeliner. He's rocked more eyeliner than I have, yeah, for sure.
I used to see Steve more often than I ever, I mean, like, it's Greg Brewer, but Steve would come into the bistro.
Oh yeah,
like he was like the rock star kind of wine.
Oh my God, for sure. Yeah. And he taught me so much. We had such a good time together. And we first met, and we became fast friends. And and we started like hanging out together and eating and drinking together and just dreaming. And it was like we had this idea of, we were drawn to this stretch of land in Santa Barbara that was proven but not completely like tapped into, and that now is Santa Rita Hills, right? So there was Sandford. I was trained there at Santa Barbara Winery, Babcock, Sweeney Huber, a couple, but we're talking about 300 acres, dude. It was zero.
Yeah.
And Santa Maria had already kind of been blown up. Biennacido, Cambria, different things. And so, and we felt good there, and we thought, that's just nothing's new. It's almost like a mashup of like the William Saliam concept with this, but applied to this little stretch called Santa Rita Hills. And it was really funny. I forgot about this. I mentioned it to Sonia the other night. I was kind of dreaming of doing my own little project, and I was going to do Pinot, I think because of Bert and stuff, and I was going to whole cluster. And Steve was going to do a Chardonnay label, and it was like a Reese's peanut butter cup, dude. It was so funny. And then we're like, well, let's do them both and do it together. And so that was it. And we saved up $12,000, which took us a while, man. I was making $7 an hour. I mean, Santa Barbara's not cheap to live in.
No, I lived there. It's not cheap. I was lucky, but that's what I want to go back. When Bruce McGuire said production's not pretty, and like you're making $7 an hour, right? So when people, I love what of the like a lot of what has happened over a few years with the Somm films, but people need to understand you're seeing the completely sexy side, completely edited to be completely sexy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
For sure.
yeah, but like
There's a lot of other
there's,
stuff.
there's a lot of stuff, and then also like with the Somms, like everybody wanted to be a Somm. I'm like, okay, you saw the top people in the world. Like there's only those are like being in the NBA, right? And even winemaker jobs, like wine director, like Bruce McGuire. People get at places and they stay there 30, 40 years. I was just with Ridge. Those people, John's been there 25. The vineyard manager's been there 40 freaking years. So you better love this.
Yeah.
You better love this because it's
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're having fun and it is sick, but we love this.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Everything about it,
Yeah.
ultimately. So you coming in, doing this podcast, arranging this, coordinating, training from home, like it's a lot.
Yeah.
And if you love it, it's an amazing thing.
I have a big smile on my face.
Yeah,
I'm here with you.
for sure.
So you guys get together like this,
So yeah, we used Santa Barbara Winery. It was like kind of Pierre wasn't really stoked about it, but he allowed us to do, like a few tons of fruit there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and at the beginning we worked with some Santa Maria sites because they're, again, the things were being planted in Santa Rita Hills, but they weren't really available yet. And so I had 2 Chardonnays, 2 Pinots. But the thing about Brewer-Clifton that's really important to emphasize is that it's about discipline and repetition and neutrality. So it was always raising these vineyards with no bias, no prejudice, need blind. Everything's done the same year over year. It hasn't changed for 27 years. And I'm prideful of that. The package hasn't changed, nothing's changed. And that's, that's never been different. And so it was 240 cases. And we spent our $12,000 on fruit and some used fermenters from Fast Parker, some used barrels from Parker. It was great, and that family's always been really nice to us too. And then we sold, and then there was the Wine Futures program, and it was pivotal for us because we used all of our money on the front end, and we didn't have any money for packaging or anything. And so that following spring, it was like, gosh, if we can get in the Wine Futures program, we'll be in that catalog that I've like coveted, that I have like every copy of. If we can make it in that, our logo's going to be in that with like Au Bon Climat and Coupé and whatever. And if we can sell some wine pre-release at a discount, that'll pay for our packaging. And then like we'll bottle in July, we'll sell it out in August if we can. And because we've never had a loan, we've never had anything. And so that's what we did. And so we got in the Futures program. It gave us mad exposure because the mailing list for Wine Cask was huge, and the association with the other wineries was huge. And we sold like 10 cases of each, which gave us enough money for the glass and wax and corks, whatever, bottled by hand. And then we were self-distributed in California for the first 4 or 5 years because we saved the margin of a distributor. So deliveries up and down the coast, we'd like reach out to the famous restaurants, Aqua Boulevard, Spago, Patina, and write a letter, send a fax, whatever we did back then. And then, set up appointments. I'd have the wine in the car. If people wanted it, it'd be like, when can you deliver? And I was like, what? How about right now? And that was it. And, some of those relationships I still have. I saw people last night, and that's how, and it was beautiful. It was like that, I was 26 years old. It was a fantasy. It was amazing.
That is amazing. Your wine's amazing. I mean, like, as I think a lot of Chardonnays, white Burgundies, they get older. And for me, there's a point where it's just too honeyed, too toffeed. This still has, you can still taste the citrus.
Yeah.
It's still racy.
Salty.
Salty, salinity. I mean, you're getting a little nuttiness, but not like I've had, you've tried these white Burgundies, like these pre-mocks where the wines are like they're like way darker than this, and they're just nutty. But this is as this is fun part. You can't get this bottle, but you guys need to get on the Brewer-Clifton list for sure.
The Santa Rita Hills. I mean, it's the same. Santa Rita Hills does it, man. It's. When I'm meeting with staff and sales teams, lemon, lime, salt. I always go there. It's like a margarita,
salt, yeah.
a salty thing, the sea air. We're right on the ocean. It's windy, it's foggy, it's contemplative. And I think it informs these wines to be that condiment, lemon, lime, salt. And I think, everyone's got their trip and their priorities at work, but I think the neutrality of vessel, the barrels are really, really old.
Okay. So this is
like completely neutral.
Wow.
And I think that can assist because there's a kind of an emptiness to the wine going in. There's a vulnerability to the wine on the front end because of the neutrality that I think, for us anyway, is assisting some of that freshness now. And at Santa Rita, and in this case, an old vineyard too, so that's helpful.
You know what? I think this is a good time. because we've got a lot more to talk about. We're going to take a quick break, everybody, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Greg Brewer. We're totally talking about Santa Rita Hills. And something you mentioned earlier, I remember when I moved out there, and I don't know how well you know him, I was thinking, but Brian Babcock.
The man. Love
fucking
him.
so underrated as a winemaker. I can't believe how under the radar he still is.
No, that's so funny. He's one of my best friends, and he's ahead of his time. He's so smart, and he thinks about the weirdest stuff. And it's like Brian does something, and then it's like, whoa, okay. And 20 years later, you're like, that was so badass. And it's like, I told him that the other day. I'm like, you're like a few ticks ahead of the rest of the world. And I said, and his farming practice now, like a lot of his vineyard, he's had to kind of deal with. He had some disease pressure, different things. But you know, when he took over, we planted the Mount Carmel vineyard with the nuns. Like that was gnarly. Like really high end Sauvignon Blanc in like the early '90s. I mean, everything about Brian. And he's always pushing, and he loves the craft, and he loves the craftsmanship, and being with him is like. There's like this childlike curiosity and exuberance about him.
Yeah.
That's just, it's the best. He's hysterical. He's such a funny guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this was his, he made like a bathtub wine up at Davis in like 82. So whatever that math is, you know,
40
it's his,
years.
Yeah, it's his 40th vintage. Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, and you know, talk about instrumental. Like on Highway 246 back then, it was Babcock.
Yep.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Babcock.
Know? Walton Mona, his folks.
Vander
and him.
but you're going to have the Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Brian's amazing.
Yeah, no, I remember, and just because these Santa Barbara stories, but like, I came out in '99, and you know, I was hanging with like, you know, and that's the thing, like you said, like, so I worked at the Wine Bistro, but like, winemakers would come around. Fred would come in all the time. Keith Nichols would come in all the time. Steve would come in all the time. Like people would come in all the time and bring bottles, and like, and then also, you know. Santa Barbara, like you said, it's not cheap, so there's a fair amount of wealthy people who live there, but they were all super generous, you know, and they would come in, and we would do these just random. It'd be a Tuesday night, like, all right, we're gonna do like, come on down, who's here? So and so's here. People would come in and do taste. We just grab bottles. So like, and the people would bring like Sean Thackeray, rest in peace. His wines were amazing. You know, I was in people the Cirocs, which I know we're gonna get to expose faster, but like. People were bringing heavies like Ojai and like I said, Thackeray and just Rita, her first vintage, which was the Longoria. Who made it? Did Richard Longoria?
Yeah,
made
Rick
that.
Made it.
Yeah,
I was just with Iris a couple days ago.
Yeah,
with like the documentary, the little documentary on her.
Yeah.
Her book just came out. Yeah, she's cool.
Yeah, we're trying. I'm trying to.
She's so cool. I never spent time with her.
Yeah.
She spoke at Sonia's tasting room a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and then we went to her this release of a documentary on her. Yep. She is incredible.
Yeah.
She's 86.
Yeah.
And she is so not that that doesn't mean you're not cool, but she is her life and her spirit and her like she's just being around her. It's just it's this so nourishing and energizing. She's a beautiful, beautiful woman. Yeah.
We would do these blind tastings, and I swear the 1996 Rideau and 1996 Babcock Black Label Syrah, which was probably $35, was curb stomping. Yeah, if you're like curb stomping wines 2 and 3 times per. Like they would always finish in the top 5. And they would be like top 3. Those two would always.
Yeah.
So I, can't wait to unpack it. So you guys are out there. You're there's pioneers out there, but then you come out there now. Did I understand that you guys did you plant vineyards out there, or are you always sourcing fruit out there? How?
Well, yeah, we had no money, man. So we started off sourcing fruit, and then people were starting to plant. Like a lot of planting happened in what would be Santa Rita in the mid '90s, right? So like, Ashley's went in from Fast Parker, Foley happened, Melville happened, Gainey expanded, Santa Barbara Winery expanded. I mean, a lot of things went down. And so we got in bed with a lot of growers. So we secured an acre of Pinot Clopépe, a half acre of Pinot at Melville, and that's what gave birth to Melville. Ron was going to be a grower. We secured half an acre of Pinot there, and then we hit it off, and then off we went. But it was that kind of formative, germinating time. But we couldn't afford anything. We could afford to buy fruit. Right. We couldn't afford to do a vineyard. And that's how all that started. And the growth was slow, systematic. It was fine. And then we got some kind of once in a lifetime media attention, 0001, and then things, and that coincided with getting the appellation. That coincided with the economy blowing up, and it was kind of that perfect storm. Costa Brown. Certain people, and we all went our own ways, but like it was, again, I wish I'd been more aware of how rare that was. I was like, oh yeah, we figured it out.
Yeah.
We figured out the wine business.
We're dope.
Yeah. And it happened so fast, and it was kind of like it was just things took off. It was fun.
Oh, this is now. I mean, when you're dealing with like a Greg Brewer, like you're gonna be drinking some great wines. We're doing the little rinse now, so we can get into this Pinot. Wow. Yeah, I think when we were in an elevator coming up, I was like, like I'm a guy who like when you're in it, you don't realize it sometimes. Ooh.
And I would like, looking back, I'd love to think that we appreciated it all, but it was all happening so fast. I mean, it was, picture, I'm 30, 31. There's, Melville is expanding and blowing up. Like Brewer-Clifton is down the street. I'm carrying these two jobs, which I love them both. I gave all I could to both. Melville first, because Brewer-Clifton was smaller and, and my kids were super, super young. I mean, it was like a lot was happening, and it was like holding on. How fast could we pack boxes? How fast could we swipe credit cards? I mean, it was really just doing the best we could. We had no team. We had no staff. I mean, it was kind of like just going for it. But when when Parker wrote us up very, very favorably at the end of 2001, and that's when at that time we weren't taking anything from the business. Like the first thing we did was cell phones. Steve got a blue one. Well, Steve got a red one. I got a blue one. That was like our first splash out Brewer-Clifton moment. But we're still kind of figuring it out. And then at the end of 2001, his like end of year issue in the Advocate, when Bob would reflect on his year and like the hedonist kind of thing, it was like his top restaurants, his top crazy dinners, and he wrote the single greatest revelation of all of his tastings of 2000 were the wines of Brewer-Clifton. And it was like, and then. One day I woke up and it was like I had like 40 voicemails because my cell phone was our business line. And I was like, what's happening? And then my mailbox filled up and I was like, what's going on? I was like, can I join your mailing list? Can I join your mailing list? I was like, what's happening? Because I didn't know what had happened.
Right.
And so I found like a legal pad and I'm like scribbling down names so I could delete messages so I could take more. And it was like this feverish, crazy thing. And it was that era of mailing lists, when, C-Smoke was happening, we were happening, Costa Brown, whatever. And then that was, that. And that kind of, that time of that. And it was, and then that gave birth, and then in 2005, we started a farming team and then we started planting vineyards. But, in a lot of ways, we had no business doing that stuff. That's not for the faint of heart or people that don't have money. Vineyard stuff is a different deal.
Yeah.
It's one thing, like you and I could come up with 10, 20 grand. We know tons of people.
Right.
We have sales channels.
Yep.
We could start a fun little project and it would be fine. Vineyards are vineyards. I mean, that's like a different notch. And we had no business doing that, to be honest. I mean, we did it, but like by the, hair of our chinny chin chin, it was,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Land in California. I'm going to buy land in California and put grapes on it. That takes money.
Yeah. and we now that we're on this Machado Pinot, it's a great segue. So we didn't have the money for land, right? So we assumed the responsibility of a vineyard called Mount Carmel that Brian originally planted with an order of Carmelite nuns. This awesome vineyard that was like it overlooked Sandford and Benedict. It was always like, oh my gosh, if we could ever even access that fruit, that'd be amazing. And so we did that, and we started with a farming team of 2 people, both of which I still work with. Both they're amazing, work brothers, but then, and then we planted a vineyard called 3D, and then in 2008 we planted Machado. So with our vineyards, we leased the land. So there are a lot of, everyone knows this. I've only worked on Highway 246 my whole life. I've never touched a grape from outside of Santa Barbara in 32 years.
Wow.
And so, we all know everybody. It's fine. People trust us. And the Machado family is beautiful. They came to the area from Portugal in 1917. They have 1,200 acres. And I said, hey, would you be open to leasing 15 acres of land? And they're like, yeah, of course. And so, we found a little nook and planted it. So we own the vineyard. We planted the vineyard. That's fine on their land. And I love that responsibility of someone else's family legacy because it's a big responsibility. Like my name's not that important, but I'm carrying someone else's family's legacy with the Machado.
Mm-hmm.
And this wine, I think, demonstrates some of that mutual trust and respect. You know, that the wine's calming. The wine is, you know, it has that calming spirit, I think, because the Machado family and us are really, really good. And I love celebrating them. I love telling their story. And, you know, here's the result through the wine.
Yeah. I really appreciate and love your reverence. And it just, what you just said about like Machado, I see the similar thing. You see that more up north because there's more historic vineyards because, you know, in the Napa Snow, but you see the Tel de Secchi's and the Pagani ranches and, like, you know, the Jackass, like the Monterosas, like to be like your steward of the fruit from there, right? Like, and your ability to make your expression of that fruit, but also the honor, like to even be given the fruit to craft is such a huge deal. I didn't know the history of the Machado, you know what I mean? So I'm finding this, like, it's very bright, it's very red.
Yeah, and that's our aesthetic is that, right? So in the case of Pinot Noir, like everything we do is neutral.
Yep.
It's very important to us. And so there are barrels that held this 2020 Machado that held our 96 Pinot. We have barrels that we've never cycled out, right? We're completely neutral. And so that's a whole nother, it's kind of a different part of this conversation. But
that's under I have wine philosophy. We'll get to that.
Okay, yeah. So with Pinot Noir, we're a whole cluster house. Yeah?
Okay.
So this is not destemmed at all. It's very primitive. It's very
sauvage,
elementary.
Yeah.
But I think for us, stem participation has always been a priority. And I think, you know, when you do that, we're farming for stem, you know, the clones we use, where we planted, how we farm, everything. It's the devil's in the details. But we, you know, we're a whole cluster place. And I think when you ferment whole cluster, the wines, there's a brightness to them, there's a lift to them, and there's something very primitive about that. It's polished. It's not like a
No.
I don't mean primitive in a
No, I know what you mean. Like,
messed up.
Right.
Like,
no, not like in some I'm making natty wine kind of way.
No, I mean it's a polished thing, but it's raw, right? It's
I get like you know, the whole cluster, right? That's the thing. Kermit Lynch with his big fight, like you know, like it just adds so much character to the wine. And then also I know had a friend who was out in Paso Robles, and he's like, man, I had like 8-year-old barrels. I had to go full cluster. I needed to get some structure and complexity in the wine.
I've got tannin somewhere.
Yeah, you got to get tannin somewhere. Right? I like
it's like nose to tail cooking.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we have it here, so let's make, you know, lemonade out of lemons kind of thing. Yeah.
So what was your first vintage? What was your first release for you guys?
96.
96. Okay.
But it was just doing what other people were doing, right? So Chris, Bert, Bruce, to a certain extent.
Yep.
You know, it was kind of like just taking what other people were doing and tasting those wines and being like, wow, the whole cluster thing's cool. And so we went for it out of the gates, like 100% dogmatically, you know. And we had some Pinots in the 90s that were, you know, they're kind of green and weird, and they kind of went south. But, you know, it's like blowfish or raw chicken. I mean, you have to kind of, your game has to be pretty good to do stuff. And so, we're always refining. We're doing the best we can. But I think with this Machado in particular, when I smell it, I keep saying it primitive and elementary, but when I smell it, I don't think about wine or Pinot even, but what it transports me to, and maybe it's a little suggestive because I'm on the East Coast, but again, visiting my dad, like he lived on, you know, Long Island Sound, like Little Harbor. I'd walk from the house, like down this gravel pathway in the summertime to the harbor and mess around on the beach, whatever. But the wild berry bushes in New England in the summertime, there's something savage and brambly, and
it is brambly,
and
that's
like
great,
poke, you know, like those bushes are, and there's a very slight greenness. But for me, stems are like a corset, right? We've got this really generous, curvy fruit, and the stems frame that fruit. They prop it up, they lift it up. And there's a savory piece, like the way soy is on sashimi. Like it renders the richness savory. And ideally, stems are providing that kind of voice through the wine. That's always the goal.
Man, that's freaking amazing. So, and so you're doing this, you're growing this out. And like I said, then you were instrumental in Melville. Who's behind Melville? I mean, who's the family, or what was the force? Obviously, you are the winemaking force, but like who?
Well, yeah, but it was collaborative. My whole thing is like working together with people. No one, I don't make anything. You know, it's like it's under our watch. We're very careful. We do the very best we can, but it's all about discretion and like like these wines are yours now. Like you cared for their temperature, you cared for how they were opened, you cared for the glassware, right? So it's very transitory. It's it's ephemeral. Like it's not like I'm the winemaker. It's a relay. Like I'm responsible for a while, but then it's like it's yours now. And so, Melville, was very much that. And it's a very, very kind family. It was Ron Melville's the father, 2 sons, Brent and Chad. So Chad's heading everything up now. Production farming. He farmed the whole time. So we worked, our desks were this far apart for each other for 20 years. And so, it's their family's thing. And, they're on both sides of Babcock, and it's a beautiful property. And they gave me amazing opportunities. And I met so many people. And I learned a tremendous amount there. And then it was an appropriate time to move on.
Yeah.
At the end of 15, for myriad reasons. It just made sense. And they're doing awesome now. And it's great. And looking back, it's cool. At first it was hard to leave, because it was like I gave everything to it. I was a partner for a while. And now just like seeing it continuing to excel and get great scores and jam and be so vibrant in the marketplace is great, because it should. I mean, it's almost like raising kids or something.
I was thinking it's like
if you do a good job, I mean, if you do the best you can somewhere and offer contribute all you can as one of the pieces of the puzzle, and then if you leave and the puzzle is still cool to look at, then that's awesome.
Totally.
That's
No, I love that. I love that. So when did we'll get to that, but is it Dia or Diatom?
Diatom.
Was that in the works? Because you obviously are a very thoughtful person. Was in the works when you're at Melville, or like when did you conceive that idea and bring it into fruition?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So it kind of started at Melville. So, let's go back to 2000. Okay. So picture you coming to Santa Barbara.
Yep.
That era. And, I love Japan. I love things that are raw. I love like the precision of that culture and everything. And pride of work and craftsmanship and everything. And it was also an era when I was working in New York a fair amount. And it was an era where a lot of somms were like, I don't like Chard, I hate Chard. Like it's all about Gruner, Riesling, whatever. Yeah. And
ABC.
And so it was like a fraction of the motivation was that. It was mostly like this very sashimi, pure, restrained kind of thing. And so at Melville, I had an idea of a wine that we did called Inox, which is French for stainless steel, right? And I remember, calling Ron Melville and saying, I've got this idea. There's this block called A1. And I said, it's almost like Wagyu. It's funny. It's a block called A1. And I was thinking about doing like a little 100K slot in a stainless steel tank and like tight, cool, like not like an entry level opening band Chardonnay, but like something really cool and raw and like cold stainless blocked mallow early bottling. And he was a day trader. He's like, what's my risk? And I go, nothing. I go, if it's lame, we'll put it in the estate wine. And he's like, okay, great, let's try it. And I said, and it needs to be like at least half as much more than the estate wine because it needs to be perceived like a slice of Toro or something, right? And so, and it was in the era of like heavy glass and stuff. So it was like heavy bottle, like silver wax, the whole thing. And it was really successful and it was cool and it was very rewarding to do and people were ready for it. And so then that gave birth to Diatom in 2005. So a diatom is a plankton fossil that we have a lot of in Lompoc, where the winery is. It's fossilized plankton. It's used in filtration. It's used in freeway paint. It's like shards of glass, essentially. And I wanted to kind of celebrate the landscape and use Chardonnay as a vehicle for it. And so that's what Diatom was all about. So that started in 2005. And it's been very beautifully disruptive in the marketplace because it's so frequently in life, there's polarity, right? I think if you start with something like rich and intense, there's a tendency to build on it. So it's either like, it's big and decadent and over the top, or it's like lean, high frequency, high strung, pitchy, whatever. And the Diatom model is exploring where those two things meet. It's big and neutral, So big, intense, voluminous, driven Chardonnay raised in a vacuum. It's very cloistered. It's done like the tightest, leanest, most succinct way possible. And I think it's funny. It's a wine where it's such a specific discipline and approach from one area, and the audience for it historically has become very vast, right? Because if you were into Chardonnay that's bigger and oak and toast and vanilla and spice, you're not bummed out. It's a really big wine. It's a big, intense Chardonnay. And if you're like, oh, I hate Chardonnay, my mom drinks Chardonnay, like whatever, then you're also on board because it's void of some of those elements that are awesome in Chardonnay, but some people are not into, right? And so it's very complete and inclusive as far as the style, and it's been really, really cool, And so that's Diatom in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's great because you hit so many incredible points with just in that whole time we've been talking, the whole time I've known you. But about, so like you're right, some people rail against Chardonnay and I tell people like, white Burgundy, high end, 100% new French oak. Okay, so like you said, the polarity, like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, they both love new oak, but what do you want to make, and can you dial it down? And there's ways, but like, I love what you said because there is this thing there's a whole, because people read stuff, they don't know how to interpret it, and, but like to have a wine, I can't wait to taste it, that provides that richness that like that became so popular in style and commercially and not craft the way you are, but then also it's just like it's got that finesse and that lean. So so many points you just hit that were incredible there. So what was your first vintage of Diatom?
2005.
Wow, man.
Yeah,
I mean, so
2005.
dude, so
almost 20 years.
Yeah, but like you made your first wine in 95 basically. 96.
Yeah, 96 was Brewer-Clifton. Yeah.
Started at the taste room in 91, and then like you got like 3 different wines you're working on by that time.
Yeah. Yeah. But Diatom, it's really the most personal in some ways. It's very solitary. It's very stark. I mean, it's like stark and empty and solitary. It's not lonely, but it's very singular, and it's very, very stripped down. And what's been so fascinating about this wine as well is that here I am. It's Chardonnay from a very prominent Chardonnay growing region.
Yep.
Raised in stainless steel, dude. I haven't hung the moon and stars. It's not that big of a deal ultimately. However, but the response to it has been crazy fascinating to me. Like I remember, Parker one time wrote, "Nothing like this exists in California or anywhere else in the world." Like Karen McNeil wrote, she never thought Chardonnay could be this exquisite. And I was like, wow, that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's a function of the area. Like our area is very special, and everyone would say that about their area.
I mean, I don't know. I've lived in that area, and especially I've skydived over.
Oh, nice.
That's where it was sky. And so like it's a place that you can't even fathom. Like seeing things over air, you see why it's so special. Like that coastline is pretty rugged it's not North Coastline of Calvin, but it's pretty rugged. Like it's not.
It's very rugged.
Yeah.
And I think I share that a lot when I'm doing things with people like from far away, like international things or whatever. And I'm like, look, you guys, I know you think about Santa Barbara, and what do you you think about royalty, you think about Oprah, you think about expensive resorts. That's great. And it's that. It faces south. It's gentle. People hold hands. Picnics on the beach. Balloons. Cotton candy.
Sun rises and sets over the ocean.
Yeah. No, it's nuts. But then you round the point.
Yep.
And you get up around Point Conception.
Yep.
And it's almost, don't quote me on this, because it's a weird thing to say, but it's like an equator of California.
Yeah.
You go around that bend, and it's a different animal. That ocean is cold. And we've got different sharks up there. And you don't hang out on the beach out there.
No.
You wear fleece, you listen to The Cure, you write poetry. I mean, it's a more contemplative coastline.
Yeah.
You don't hang out like, oh yeah, let's have a martini. Like
it's not Spicoli.
You're bundled up.
It's more like Heather's, right?
Yeah. And our area breathes that in. We open up due west onto that landscape, and so day in and day out, the wind, the fog, all that, and our soils are empty. It's all beachy stuff out there. So it's like it's just a specific place, and I think it shows in the wine because Diatom is there's nothing there. It's a very raw, empty wine, spiritually, emotionally, motivationally, but I think the wine's intensity and power and intrigue is found from the place only.
Yeah. Amazing. So we're gonna pour some of this, and give you a little rinsey rinse. Let's. But Chardonnay and Pinot Noir weren't enough for you. No, you had to make some cool climate Syrah. So talk a little bit about ex post facto.
Yeah, just for you, because I know you're a Rhone guy.
I am.
I almost sent it, and I thought that'd be like too cliche to send it to you, because you always talk and love about being Rhone things. Or too obvious. So it's funny, when I was at Santa Barbara Winery, we grafted some Syrah in '93. And so I started working with Syrah in '93 at Santa Barbara Winery. And we planted a good amount at Melville. So my whole career's been with Syrah.
Yeah.
I've just never done it, kind of on, I hate the word I'm sorry. Like, we never produced it on our campus at Brewer-Clifton. It was very Chardonnay, Pinot, and that was it. Sorry. And then
it's all good, man. People know that we consume wine.
Yeah,
on the
and
podcast.
so
Listen, that was my rinse, and wow, that was on my rinse.
and so, yeah, it was back in 2016, and I had different partners at the time, and they had this idea of like, oh God, let's maybe spin off and do a Syrah thing, a really cold climate Syrah program, and so we kind of kicked that off, and then in 2017. The gift of a lifetime of joining forces with the Jackson family. And we had the Syrah in barrel from my former partners. And I kind of said, well, I'm not sure if you knew about this. I mean, obviously you knew about it, but, and I said, I don't know what the plan would be. And they were very in favor. And they're like, yeah, let's develop something. Let's start a project around it. And that's how ex post facto came to be. I love Syrah. I really see it. It's such an interesting grape, and it's, in a lot of ways, it's a perfect grape. And why for 30 years? I've heard so frequently, I love it, but no one buys it. It's so hard to sell, whatever. I've heard that from everybody. And it's so funny because it's like, for me, if Pinot and Cabernet hooked up at a bar, like, they'd have Syrah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the best of both worlds in a lot of ways. And in a cold spot, Syrah's great anywhere. In a cold spot, it maintains something so pretty and peppery, and I don't know, and I just, and it comes in really late season. It's like the bar crowd for us at work. Like, we have our first turn or two of Pinot and Chard. It's like pre-theater or whatever.
Yep.
And Syrah rolls in at like 10:30 or 11,
yeah.
and you give it good service, but you're coming off your, the more high-strung, audience, and it's all a whole cluster. It's very old school, but that's ex post facto. And then lawyer and in legal terms, obviously you can't be accused of a crime if it wasn't a crime when you committed it.
Yep.
And so there's something kind of like, it's a little cheap, but like naughty about me doing something.
No, I get it.
Other than my paradigm.
Who's this guy who makes Pinot Noir and Chardonnay?
So there's something kind of like against the grain,
yeah.
like I shouldn't be doing this type of thing. And then that we don't have the bottle here, but the label is type keys, and that goes back to Mom. And I remember, being a kid and going to court with her, really. And I'd go to her office. I was 12 or 13. I'd read a crime report. I'd meet the victims, witnesses, detectives. And then I'd go see her in court, and it was amazing. And it was the era of typewriters and stuff. And I've always been intrigued by letter exchange, typing. I love that commitment where you, like, writing a note to a girl you have a crush on in third grade. You write and you commit an emotion to someone.
Yep.
And you can't control the outcome.
Yeah, wow.
And that's how we approach our wine. When it goes to barrel, we rarely taste barrels ever. And we don't blend the way people normally blend. It's like this surrender to the craft and surrender to the landscape. We're really careful, but it's in barrel. It hits barrel after at the end of harvest, and then it's a mailbox. We've done the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
We've sacrificed everything we have to that product, and then it's done. Like, what are we going to do to coerce its outcome? We're going to let it be what it is, and so that's the ex post facto model.
Amazing nose. It's like a Outcast song. It's so fresh and so clean.
Yeah, back to Diatom. Yeah. So
yeah, Diatom. But I want to, but the ex post facto. Sonia actually had sent me a bottle and a box. She sent me some of your wines, and I was like, oh. And you said this. It's very interesting because, like I said, that Babcock Black Labels out in Santa Rita Hills. I had Dottie and John were on here, and they brought a wine, Commence a Dream, Syrah. And it was Santa Rita Hills. And like Greg said, I am a Rhone. I love it all, but like I'm going to default Grenache and Syrah. I'm just going to default there, just because I think they're so flavorful. Like, unless I'm drinking some really good Pinot, you know what I mean? I'm going to default there. But like, you're right. I'm like, and hers is not like big. It was like 13.9, maybe 14. You don't have to be super big. You get all this extraction, but the florals and the pepper,
they're so pretty.
and even the color of the wine, it's almost like it's like luminescent sometimes. You're swirling like God. And these are both wines that there's no chemicals make it purple. Like it's this luminescence in the wine that is just it's intoxicating looking at it. It's not even drinking it. You're like it's drawing you in.
Yeah.
You know, and I loved the deft hand you had on that Syrah. Like I was like, this is, and then obviously, you know, if you can have the patience to drink it over a few hours, it just starts. You know, it starts showing itself even more and more and more. It gets a little bit. It gets a little. And I wouldn't say slutty, but it's like the sleeve folds. It's like, hey, big guy. Like I got the fruit. I got the flavor you want.
It's all a conversation. It's all a conversation. Yeah. There's icebreaker. And then you kind of, you know.
Oh, what's next? So you mentioned earlier that also with ex post facto that it came out of your relationship with Jackson Family Wines. So let's talk about that, if you don't mind.
Of course.
What's it like to be approached by a bigger, lack of a better word, conglomerate who's interested in purchasing your wine? And this is like, and you're so thoughtful, like, and you know, I fly off my mouth and say shit all the time that I don't know about, but like, what's it like? What was that like when they approached you, and then what did you go through when you agreed to sell the label to them?
It's incredibly flattering, right? I mean, you know, when someone reaches out to you, especially with the earned reputation of, you know, a family business that's born out of wine and vineyards and land and farming, you know, and you know, a family that is so invested in California, and they've been so invested in Santa Barbara for decades. Yeah. Cambria, things in Los Alamos, everywhere. It's such a prominent part of Kendall-Jackson. Our area is and has been since I was like we were.
Yeah,
in high school.
you go up and down the 101, and you're like, shit, they own a lot of vineyards.
A lot. Yeah. I mean, up and down every, you know, and it's farming, and it's really beautiful. So when they made the overture, it was like, oh my gosh, and I had partners at the time, and they were so kind and so awesome, and they loved being a part of the winery, and you know, and I said, hey guys, like this would be an amazing thing in my life to be able to work in the service of this family and in this kind of situation, and so the partners I had they were so beautiful from 15 to 17. You know, they were really kind to me, and they said, yeah, we can tell this is meaningful to you. Let's do it. And then it was quick, and I can say, you know, my career's been amazing. I've had some really scary times, you know, and sometimes I know especially in this format, you love talking about like, you know, darker, harder things. And 08 to 12, 13, 14 were very, very dark for me. It was really hard. Divorce was really hard. Economy was really hard. You know, I did things to keep this business going that I wouldn't say on the air. I mean, it was you do what you got to do. You know what I mean? And so,
bro, I know.
Some really really challenging times. Yeah. And I've been on the covers of magazines. I mean, you know, I've had some highs too. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. And it's been a roller coaster in a lot of ways. Mostly good, but you know, some really tough stuff too. The past 5.5 years of Jackson Family have been the best. Like, I've never felt more supported. The wineries have never felt more mine. I love serving people. I love pleasing people. Yeah. And it's amazing. And I think, you know, sometimes I'm asked a lot, especially old friends of mine. They're like, especially right after we joined forces. That sounds big.
I know what you mean.
We got together. Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, how long do you have to be there? How long is your contract? And I'm like, dude, I'm in. Like, it's amazing. Like, why would I go anywhere else? And that's the knee jerk of like, what's your next gig? Are you going to start another label? Yeah. And there's no way, you know. And I think, you know, sometimes when you think about a bigger operation, there's this funny tendency, I'm not sure why, to like not be as into it. And I think about other things like hotels or cars or whatever. Think about Volkswagen Auto Group. I always go back to Volkswagen as a default. Volkswagen's awesome, and my first car was a Scirocco. I had a GTI.
Oh my God, I love the Scirocco.
Yeah, 16 valve. That's my first dream car. Yeah. So Volkswagen owns Porsche, Audi, Bugatti, Lamborghini, Ducati, right? So there's stability in the buoyancy of a company that has that, and a company like that needs, if it's, I think, managed in a very confident way, needs things to be expansive. Yeah, you don't need a zillion Jettas and a zillion whatever, but the Ducati piece, the Lamborghini piece, like it's a different thing. And so I have this big octopus tattoo on my arm. Like I see myself like an arm of an octopus, it encourages me to push even harder, right? Because we have Hartford Court, we have Copain, we have these beautiful wineries in the company, and I'm this weird deviant thing in Lompoc, and I need to keep being that.
Right. That's
you know what I mean? And
probably
that's
what
such
attracted them
inspiration.
to you.
Right, because I'm in a warehouse in Lompoc with old barrels, dude. There's not that much value in me.
Right. Well,
Except for
I'm saying-
maybe, well, I mean, you know what I mean? Except
Yeah.
for maybe there's a cultural thing, right? So
Yeah.
so anything that we can do to keep fueling that culture and keep pushing that culture, and all they want is for me to keep feeding it, you know? And it's just, and they're always there to, like anything I ever would need. And the thing is, I don't need anything except for their support and sale and buoyancy. COVID would have taken me out, you know, but we're a buoyant company. And so we weathered that storm. I'm like a Navy SEAL or something.
Yeah.
And I was able to jam back to the mothership
Yeah.
and have some clam chowder and a new sweater to kind of warm up and lick my wounds because like a great white shark was going to eat me. You know what I mean? And so, and with that comes a calming at work because we're not stressed about payroll every 2 weeks.
Yeah. No.
And I was for a long time.
I believe it. I mean, Eric Jensen said something similar, like, you know, because he was like, dude, I could never imagine that, like, now I get to do what I want to do and don't have to worry anymore, man. I get to just focus on this, like, and he's a big farmer. Like, I get to focus on what I'm good at and know they got me, you know. So it makes a lot of sense. And, you know, you said earlier about, going through the divorce, and I don't want to talk about divorce anymore, but I would like to talk about your wife Sonia, who you're with now. Who
The
I think
Macedonian marvel.
Yeah. So tell everybody your wife's name and a little about her wines and how'd you guys meet? I don't even know how you guys met. I mean, obviously you're winemakers.
Sonia Magdevsky. She's incredible. She amazing woman. Yeah, we've been married for 6 years now. We met in 2012 at Presqu'île. It was a round table discussion. I had heard of her, but I didn't, and it was like 6 or 7 producers. I was a wine writer, and it was like he and I were like on the opposite sides of the table. I was like the old patriarch, I guess, on the wine writer, and then some other producers on both sides. And she's beautiful and cool, and it was great. But we're friends, and it was fine. And she was in a long relationship, and she was engaged and living in Malibu, and I was dating different people and in relationships, and but it was friends. It wasn't like, oh hey, wow, let's throw caution to the wind and do this. It was like, oh hey, what's up, bud? It was that. And then it was 2012, so we were still struggling at work, and so I was looking for custom clients to come to work to help subsidize rent and stuff. So she came on as a client. It was all cool, friends, whatever. And then she left for a while, and that was a whole nother conversation. And then came back and different things. But we were just friends. And then it was end of 2014, and we just like left a wine tasting together at Rick Longoria's place one evening, and it was so funny. We just like walked out to the car together, and then it was like kind of a long hug, and it was like, oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Like,
I've had that hug where you're like, whoa.
Oh, that wasn't just like a pat on the back, peck on the cheek, like, oh, let's get coffee.
That heart-to-heart connection.
Yeah, it was like, oh, whoa, that was
energy.
And we started texting that night. It was all, innocent and cool, and and then I wasn't anticipating being married again. I mean, I'm good solo. I mean, it was fine, and then we started dating. Unbeknownst to me, she was getting out of that relationship, and in mine, the one I was in at the time wasn't awesome, and so the timing worked out. And then we started dating, and it was like I couldn't imagine not living with this human. I mean, she's so everything about her, and that's it. And her wines are amazing. She's amazing. I mean, she brings such life and spirit, and she's so creative and driven. And talk about gritty, So she's. Second generation. I mean, Macedonian.
So
from
Macedonia
Detroit.
isn't even like really a country
She's
anymore.
real.
So
No,
like,
she's
so like,
Slavic.
exactly.
She's Slavic.
So
She's
like,
real. Yeah,
those are people who are like who are badass. Who like, and I've seen the pictures of her grandmother.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
dude, her folks are badass. She's bad, but like they worked. They had Baskin Robbins. Her folks came to Detroit and they were teenagers. They didn't speak any English, and it was that story. Yeah, and then it was a Baskin Robbins, a dry cleaner, invest in a building somewhere and They worked around the clock, right? And Sonia was raised working in Baskin Robbins. When you watch Sonia sweep and mop, you're like, whoa, you got game. Like, that's the only time we've had conflict is if she's sweeping, and if you go near her pile, she's like, it's real. And she's so like, yay, rainbows, butterflies, everything's pink, everyone loves her, she's pigtails, whatever.
Yeah.
She's Slavic. So there's another side of that where, you cross her, and it's like, oh wow, that's there. So when she's sweeping, you just stay out of the way. 'Cause it's a real deal. And no, she's just a force, and she just. I can't even say enough. She's so incredible, and her wines are incredible, and her spirit just lifts everyone around her, and she's really tough, and she's gritty, and what I love, our relationship is so great because we, when we get home, it's late. We both work all day long. We get home, it's late. We talk about the business, I guess, but what's cool is, and we've got wine, whatever's like left over, wine's around from friends, whatever. But she always says it's like the shorthand, So she'll come back from her tasting room, I'll come back from like being on the road, and then we just get right into it, just sharing what happened, and the support of that is something that is just such a gift. It's a gift of a lifetime. And she's made me such a better person, and she's incredible. Yeah, and she's in Los Alamos, so there's this little town in Santa Barbara that. Back when you were there, dude, Los Alamos was sketchy, dude. It was like not a place to hang out.
It was like here's what I say. I mean, imagine you see those fucking westerns, there's tumbleweeds, and you mean like what are you doing around here, buddy? Someone will draw on you and shit. It had that feel to it,
and it was real. I mean, there was a biker bar and a Mexican restaurant. I mean, it was stark. You just rolled through. Yeah, and that was it.
It's like on my way to San Luis Obispo.
Yeah, and now there's a Michelin star restaurant there, and it's so funny. Back to the whole lucky thing. People are like, oh my God, you're so lucky to be in Los Alamos. And she's like, okay. Yeah. But she went to Los Alamos because that's all she could afford for her tasting room.
Yeah.
It was $800 a month. And she's like, she posted up there. And she's like, she washed her own glasses at night in an apartment she borrowed. I mean, the whole thing. And so just, again, that gritty stamina is, I'm going to choke up, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. And her tasting room now is amazing. And what I love, I mean, there's what you just love Sonia. Okay, you meet Sonia, she smiles, you just love her, but she's you don't want to fuck with her. I think that's why Pam loved you too so much. It was so realness, the realness. She had this. My wife Pam, she thought like you see people, you don't know how wine people are, but you guys are so real and down to earth. But you guys also do some crazy fermentation thing together. What is that thing you guys are doing?
So Sonia makes a co-ferment cider.
Yeah.
Thing. And every year the grape is different. She does that. And it's such a hassle, and she does it at work, and it's like a 100 case thing. And I'm like, why? Like, why? The juice comes in, it's just a night, because it's very strict. Like, I only wear black, and like the winery is like, it's like the same. It's like a
you're like remember the original, The Fly? Not the original, but the one with, Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, for
Malcolm.
sure. Oh, yeah.
Just like, I'm wearing this. It looks good.
For sure.
Because I got to go to fucking work.
100%.
Yeah.
Always the same, unyield. It's like, I'm a total softie. I'm crying, it's like, but like at work, it's very that. She's like, oh, let's try that. That looks fun. And so I gave her a hard time for a while. I was like, God, this is such a nightmare. Like, why, And then one day it was so funny. It was like, when you take a road trip with someone and you have some crazy, stupid idea, and it stays in the car. You know what I mean? It's so fun. You get laughs, and then you're like, oh, that's funny. Like, let's move on. So one day we're at home, and I was like, it's just, somehow like the idea of like cider factory came up, and I was like, yeah, on the label there would be like a factory, and there'd be a rainbow coming out of the factory, and an apple with a worm coming out of it, and like no secrets at the factory. All this, it was like this funny joke. And then it was like a few months later, and she's like, "Oh, here's the label proof." And I'm like, "No, it was Sonia and Greg Cider Factory."
Exactly.
And so anyway, so it's her thing, and so like the Sonia and Greg part's really funny because it's like, it's almost like,
that's so funny.
A joke to me to rope me, which is her spirit.
Yeah, no,
playful and joyous. And
it's super crazy cool. And just you two, it's just an amazing said, and like when you guys showed up, I was just felt so honored, because literally, we were locked down in 2020, and then I'm like, I was like, all these people came to see me,
Yeah, of course.
And I was like, the winemaker of the year came to see me. It was so amazing.
We felt the same.
Yeah,
we felt the same that you were there.
Yeah,
Think about it. Sonia says all the time, like, time is the one thing we share in equal measure. Yeah. It's fleeting. There's so many demands on our time, yeah? Distractions, time, responsibility, good and bad, but like everyone has a lot of stuff. And especially now, like people are reading like succinct and fast.
Oh my God, people are reading less.
And so, it's, you made the time. You both made the time to come out and commit and do that.
Yep. Yep.
And just out of respect for you, it was, and we were invited to join you.
I know.
And that was amazing to get the invitation.
Yeah, I
and
thought that
it
was
was a great night. It was awesome.
I want to give you a shout out, Jeremy, because that was cool. That was very thoughtful.
Cool.
Like he was like, who?
I still rock my tooth and nail.
Yeah, I know.
We're on the plane coming out.
I love that hoodie.
That was your
That's
Jennifer
a
West soft.
So, we have some time left, but one thing I want to really get to, like, there's words you use vulnerability. You've used, stark. You've used solitary. You use repetition. What is your? What would you say if you could expound on your winemaking philosophy?
Well, it's there's something very steadfast about the approach, right? And I think all wines taste good. Wines have never tasted better. You and I right now could go to any wine store or grocery store, close our eyes, reach down to the ankle biter shelf. We'd pop the cork, and it would be fine.
Yeah,
we would have a great conversation, and we'd enjoy a nice bottle of wine, right? So that's awesome.
Yep.
And then it begs the question, why? Like, why be involved with, why produce it? Like, you need to be relevant, and so everything we do at work, it's not for everybody, it's fine. But it's, it was an area that wasn't completely tapped into. And the neutrality is simply that it keeps that area more that area. Like, there's no other influence that can be shared by other people, right? I love New Oak, it's fine. We just don't employ it because it's part of this deal of being, I love when people say nothing this doesn't resemble other things I've had, right? And that to me is the goal. So you think about Bjork, you think about Depeche Mode, you think about Prince, you think about things where one note.
Think about Jamiroquai. You just how are people doing this
one note, and you're like, that's that person. And they evolve, and they refine, and there's different chapters of their career. But it was 7 or 8 years ago in New York, and I had the opportunity, it was incredible, to have a meeting and lunch with Diane von Furstenberg in her office down in Meatpacking at her headquarters. It was myself, my daughter, she's 16 then, into fashion and stuff. So the three of us, Diane, I walk into her office, right, and it's Diane von Furstenberg, right?
Yeah,
I started crying.
I'm thinking, how did you hook that up?
I don't know. So I walk in her office, and I'm, Sonia, I come off all black and hard, and Sonia calls me Marshmallow Marshy, and it's the secret, and now it's not gonna be a secret, but I started crying. Her energy and power was oh my God, you're you, and I'm with you right now. And so it's overwhelming. We're around this big round table, we're just hanging out, and chilling, and she had just given an award to Beyonce the night before. She's let me read what I said. And we're we saw it on TV, and she's reading her notes. And I was whoa, you're so real. The point is, I asked her, I said, may I ask you a question? She's of course, And I said, from being a princess to the Studio 54 era, Warhol, bankruptcy a couple of times, because her book is amazing. And just seeing, again, the ups and downs, I said, how? And here we are. And I said, you look at a wrap dress, you look at a print that you use. Mm-hmm. How have you maintained that stamina and the endurance to do that? And she, she's playing with her. She's just so beautiful, and she said, "Always be true to your brand." And she said, "That's all you have." And it really hit me because that things change. Stem inclusion, not stem inclusion. Ties get skinny because ties get fat. Sideburns, not shoulder pads, leg warmers. Things come and go. But if you hold on, that's the hard part. And so that's something that I'm prideful about. Particularly with Brewer-Clifton because it's the oldest project and it really hasn't changed. There's been the tiniest. We switched to a technical cork and tiny little refinements, but the culture and the trip and the area has not changed, and that's important. And it also revolves around kind of erasure of self, right? We're very disciplined. We're very, we give everything we have. We surrender to the craft. I've only worked on that one road for my whole career, Highway 246. But it's a surrender to it because it's not about me, It's about just relaying the voice of our place to the world and being the quietest conduit possible to do that. And so that's really the spirit of the winery.
Yeah, I think it's amazing because you also said, which I thought was profound, that and this you find this in teachers. My mom always said I should be a teacher, which I think she was most happy when I was doing what I was doing. I'm sad she's missing this because she passed away, because she would enjoy this. 'Cause my mom, I tell people, my mom was like a black Carol Burnett. Anything Carol Burnett could do, my mom could have done. Like, my mom was fucking funny, and she was serious, and she was my nemesis. That we were so close. She was my nemesis because she knew. I was like, you don't know what I'm doing, and she knew my every move. But what you said was, and you find this with people who go into education, like the service. Like when you said, the opportunity to be in service to the Jackson family one. I think that's profound. In a world where like it's easy to get an ego. It's easy. Like people, even with this podcast, this isn't about me. I get to have these conversations. I'm blown away when people come in and want to talk to me, and when people will spend 90 minutes listening to a conversation I had with someone who was amazing. But where does that? Is it from your mother? How you grew up? Like, where's the humility you have? The selflessness, the ability to take yourself out of it. Like, this is all you, but you're out of it, though.
I don't know. I don't know if it's like low self-esteem. I really don't know what it is, but it's funny. I think we're all, nothing's wrong. I think everything is like, people are wired for ownership, or they're wired for service, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are people that, it's almost like a conversation where like, oh, I wouldn't work that hard unless it was my hardware store kind of thing, versus, for me, I'm maybe more like a dog or something. Like I love pleasing people, and I derive so much nourishment and satisfaction from like doing that, and so the where that germinated, I don't know for sure, but I think it's ultimately, it's maybe why Japan resonates with me so much. There's this kind of discipline and giving all you have, and this heightened awareness of others, right? And this like, putting everything else first in some ways. And I don't know. I mean, I falter. I'm not saying I'm Mother Teresa, like, but I have an ego. I mean, I'm not. I'm
Well, you need it.
Flawed.
We all people. You need a certain. You have to have ego to get anything done in this world. I think Charles Barkley said, and I agree. Like, you have to have a certain amount of ego to get anything significant done.
Right.
But can you rein it in?
Right. And so, I met with the sales team before coming over here, and the only reason I told them this, and I feel it to my core, the only reason why we produce something is to sell it.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm serving them.
Yep.
Right. And they inform the wines. You inform these wines, because when I love what I do, and there's still times in the middle of the night I'm bruised, bleeding, cold, wet at work, alone, and I love it most of the time. And every now and then, you hit those walls, and you're like, wow, I'm on the edge. And I think, wow, like, don't let others down. You know what I mean? Like, under my watch, like, I'm going to do the very best I can, because sales has never been harder. Things like this are really hard. Like, so anything I can do, like Brewer, like, rally and figure it out, because people rely on this. And it's hard enough. So don't ratchet anything down, and give all that you can. There's a quote that I'll butcher, so I won't, but it's a Zen monk, and it's, like, it's something to the effect of, like, live your life like a good bonfire, like, where like nothing else remains after, like you give all you have, but there's like no ashes, there's nothing of you that remains afterwards. You've given all of yourself to the task at hand. And do I accomplish that every day? Of course not. But it's on my mind, of leaving no stone unturned, and not in a, like, oh, I do this and tinker and check every single thing. It's not that, but it's a holistic kind of giving of oneself to something at the expense of other things. I'm not going to lie.
Well,
personally, a lot of my life is not awesome.
Yeah.
But with this, there's been fidelity and loyalty and everything else, and I hopefully it shows through the craft, because it's given me so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another prevailing theme I just want to remind all you listeners of was, you talk about repetition and discipline. There's a book out now. There's a guy who studies Stoicism. His name's Ryan Hunt. It's called Your Discipline is Your Destiny. And I love how you just it's what people don't understand about success. The most successful things are just something at work that was repeated over and over. Cats, longest running play on Broadway. You go out and say the same fucking lines every fucking night. Every night.
every night for a
Well,
long
for
time.
over 20 years, right? One of the greatest things I saw, and it reminds me of you, was Glenn Fry, Eagles. Remember when they broke up? Like the guy didn't want to sing "Take It to the Limit." He's like, "I'm singing this fucking song." He's like, "That fucking song has bought you houses, put your kids through college." But but when they were young, he's like, "Oh, that's how you do it: hard work, grit, perseverance." We're in this amazing industry, and it is sexy, but the reality, success is not sexy. I've said it before.
Yeah.
It's a function of discipline, hard work, and repetition, and being willing to fail. And like you just said, like the undulations you had, everybody, like Danvers were like up and down. Do you have the vision that can sustain your life? So when you got when did you? I think you alluded, but like, was there a vision? Like someone came to you. What was the vision when you were like? Like that moment, in the movies where there's always a moment where like in the Matrix where you can see the code or whatever. like what was that code moment for you, man?
I think nothing was. It's a great question. Nothing was immediate. I think it's time. It's exposure to other things and cultures. I've always been drawn to Scandinavia and Japan and.
Which are
they're very similar.
Stoic.
They're very similar.
Kinda,
I think they're very deliberate. They're very stripped down in a lot of ways, and Japan in particular. And there's another book. It's called Sushi Shokunin. I think it was like sushi, and it's like this beautiful hard table book, but it's like stories of 20, 30 sushi chefs in Japan, and I read it, and it's like I get so turned on to what things that turn you on, and it's the satisfaction with which a life can be lived. Someone who literally, it's like 50 years, that's all they've done. And like they get up at 4 a.m. and they ride their bike to the fish market and they have their basket and they meet with the same purveyors and they go and they do the mise en place and they wash their hands at whatever time of day. And they have 9 seats in their and like it's this for 50 years. Like that's it. And there's that's it. That's like a beautifully lived life. And I think that resonates, that resonates. And I think, there's something calming with that. When you watch someone who's done something for a long time, watch a cook, watch a musician, watch something who's like done something their entire lives, seamstress, artisan, cobbler, candle maker, whatever. Like there's something so beautifully calming about watching their hands, isn't it? Because it's muscle memory, it's deliberate, it's composed. And that's always spoken to me. Yeah, that's how I like to live my life.
And we have to turn back to this wine before we finish. What the fuck is this? It literally so this is stainless? This is no...
Yeah, this is Diatom. So the thing about Diatom, and you said it in such a kind way, the motivation here is so specific, dude. It's like, this is from Los Alamos, this bottling, and it's like this very specific, very singular, kind of plankton fossil. That's what I'm like seeing in my head. And what's interesting is with that singularity, the outcome of the wine is vast, right? Because blind, it's fascinating when you're with people out of context, like we are now, kind of.
Yep.
Well, context of me, but the style doesn't even come to mind. Like stainless doesn't come to mind immediately. And then what's interesting is this happened this morning. It happened last night. It's not like, stump someone. What do you think? I'm not going to tell you. It's not some weird, devious, secretive thing. But people talk about Vermentino. People think about Acertico, Albarino. So it's like this oceanic, white, powerful, salty thing, which I think is a function of Santa Barbara and how this wine is raised. But it's.
But then it's
been
your mouth.
Really successful. It's a cool thing. I'm really.
But it's
proud
lush
of it.
and tropical.
Yeah.
It's. I don't. It's my show. I can say what the fuck I want to say. But it's literally like when you hook up with that girl, like, oh wow, your breasts are bigger than I thought. Like, oh, you know what I mean? Like you're like, and you're like the bra is like, I'm like, damn, that's like fleshy and round.
It's big.
But on the nose,
it's a big wine.
Yeah, it's a big
and
wine.
It's precise. Right?
It's precise. So,
which is the goal, right? I wanted, I wanted deliciousness and precision. Yeah. And you can arrive at it. Think about something fatty. Think about toro. Think about a big oyster. Like, you can have it. It relies on...
Those are great analogies.
It relies on salt, or it relies on something else. And so this has the flamboyance and the give and the fat and the richness of the fruit, much like Toro, Wagyu, pork belly, oysters. And with the interpretation, which is very precise, like the seawater in the oyster shell or whatever, that's what keeps it, the equilibrium there. It keeps it framed. It keeps it corralled. Because otherwise, interpreted in a different way, this would be very come hither. This would be very over the top. I mean, if this were pushed in a hedonistic way,
oh yeah,
it would have an audience for sure.
No, dude.
And it would be it could be awesome, but
Yep.
it would be a very different.
It'd be a very listen. This could go in a direction that would be very crowd pleasing, and when I say crowd pleasing, like not like on a large scale, like this could go. You could sell this shit for $200 a bottle. You throw some French oak on this thing, easy, and people are like, "Oh my god," right? Like I see that, but then I love, then I see you, and I see the expression of you in this bottle is like, but I'm just chill, but I'm more angular. I wanted this, but I have this inside of me, and I'll show you some of that. But like this is what I'm about.
Which is so nice of you. Sometimes I think if I could be a wine, I would want to be more like this one. And that sounds like maybe super cheesy, but it like there's something kind of deviant, very pure, thoughtful, articulated, flamboyant, fun, and a little like, pushing things a little,
right.
And I'm not saying I'm that, but like that, I would strive to be that type of person, through this wine. And also what's been so rewarding with this is that, when Diatom started, it was like double the price of what this is, right? It was like $40, $50.
Yep.
Because it didn't need to be financially, it needed to be perceived that way, right?
I understand. Yeah, people
had to take it seriously, like
Yep.
sashimi, right? It's not like an opening band for like Brewer-Clifton chart. It was like the same. And that was great, and it was appropriate to plant that flag. And now I derive so much satisfaction out of knowing that this retails for $25, right? And so our systems have never been tighter. We're farming sustainably. It's estate grown. Like, it's been, I'm 32 years in doing this. It's, 3 of us at work. It's Sonia, me, Domingo, and one seasonal, Juan, who's awesome, who came, come for 2 months. It's like, it's our hands. My hands are calloused and like beaten up.
It's another thing too. Everything like fucking
unreal. Like,
yeah.
This is real. And, but the point is that, like, this is all we have is invested in this wine, and it's at a price. I'm not saying $25 is no dollars. However,
no, dude, this
it's very reachable. I think because I think about if Sonia and I didn't make wine, and if people gift us wine, we trade wine, whatever. If we weren't doing this for a living, I don't know what we'd spend on a bottle of wine. We do okay financially, but I don't know, $20, $25. I mean, that would be our like, let's have some wine tonight. I'll go to the store, $20. That'd probably be our zone.
Yep.
And I think about like, wow, for $25, I'm going to give someone an experience, and it gets solid score. I mean, the wine fare is great, but I love that it's poured by the glass. I love it's on wine lists for like $50.
Yeah,
not a glass.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Bottle,
yeah, that's
amazing.
If you ever see Diatom Chardonnay on a list, you should buy it because. I'm on a lot of email lists too, and there's a old timey retailer out here in New York, and they this gets sent out, and they're like unbelievable over delivers. It always gets like 95 points as a baseline, and I know a lot of people are like points, but these are well deserved, well earned. Like these are not inflated. These are reflective of the wines. These aren't, it. And that's what they say. It's like I could find email like amazing, Santa Barbara County, Santa Rita Hills, Chardonnay, under $25. Mm-hmm. It's stupid. It's stupid.
And I love that. And it's so funny you mentioned like, if you see it on a list, buy it. It's so funny. I love nothing more. It's such a fun ego stroke. But like when I'm at home and it's like that. Almost like sunset time, and I start getting text messages from friends, and they're like kind of buzzed enough. You have 2 glasses in, like in a bar or something, and they're like photos or holding up like, oh, Brewer, like they had Diatom, and we bought 3, whatever. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you did. I can tell. Yeah. And but it's fun. I mean, think about wine lists. A lot of things in that range can be beautiful.
Yep, but it's more it's more miss than hit.
Well, it can be a little challenging sometimes, and so. I love that. And sometimes they're like, oh, they had it, so we bought a few to kind of like decide what the night was going to be. You know what I mean? But I'm like, that's great.
Yeah.
Because again, the input into this wine is like in a state vineyard that we farm, SIP certified, and the fruit comes into us in the middle of the night, and it's me receiving the truck. I mean, it's real. It's a very real thing, and it's fun to see it out and about, and to see it more, see the volume of it growing, because the price is at a point where, that kind of volumetric expansion is a possibility. It's been fun to see.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, Greg, last question for I have to let you go. What are you most excited about for the future?
Wow. I think for me, furthering the message of Santa Barbara and Santa Rita Hills, and I think, again, with Jackson family, we talked about legacy a teeny bit, I guess, like through Machado and different things. But, when we started, there's no plan, like a family business to hand down to anyone. It was like this idea, Steve and me, it was like, oh, let's do this. Let's save a few grand. And it's an interesting thing now because especially working with Jackson family, like the winery will be ongoing.
Yep.
There's a legacy with a bigger family, which is really rewarding. And then also for my runway with work, yes, I'm still scrubbing tanks and punching down, and it's very physical. And I'm 52. I try to stay fit. It's all fine. But
He's very fit.
But we're human, right?
Yeah.
So there'll be a time when I can't punch down
Yep.
and drive forklifts and whatever. And so for me, continuing to be an ambassador for the area, for Jackson family, Santa Barbara, Santa Rita Hills, and then I'm doing some teaching now, like Cal Poly, like masterclass things.
Yeah.
I've never had a wine class in my life, but I talk about bridging front and back of the house. I think about kindness. I think about inclusive language. I think about being relevant. That's the types of things I teach.
Yep.
And that gives me huge satisfaction, obviously. And then ultimately, hopefully, like a parabola. I mean, I joke that like on the very tail end of my career, and hopefully I'll be 80, 90, whatever, I want to be back in a tasting room, be it ours or whatever. And I want to take like the bachelorette parties, whatever. I mean, I want to be like, like the old guy who's like just like telling stories about the past and pouring wine for people. And that would be like the perfect way to punctuate a career that, for which I have no regret. I've made plenty of mistakes and I have no regrets.
Well, can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you,
Greg, for coming in.
To be with you, man. Thank you.
Man.
I've wanted to do this for so long.
Thank
you for the opportunity.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Tell everybody out there how they can be a part of what you're doing, where they can find your wines.
Yeah, so I mean, these days it's so easy. We've got a great sales infrastructure, with the company now. So, just Google Brewer-Clifton and you can find whatever retailer you like working with. I mean, it'll all pop up on any coast you're on, anywhere you are in the world. And then, of course, by Greg Brewer, Brewer-Clifton, just type in my name, wine, and you'll get to me really, really fast. And I reach out anytime. My cell phone's everywhere. My email's anywhere. Anyone who's listening, I've got your back. I'm always working with you too, for you, and anything I can do to kind of bring you into our world, it's always a pleasure. And it's all our website now is beautiful. It kind of got redone last year, and so it's everything in our speaking engagements. The 3 wineries. It's all compartmentalized in this one really beautiful, kind of serene website. And so go there and then just track me down, and anything I can ever do for anybody, that's it.
Supersonic. And for all the listeners out there, don't forget to check out the show notes for each episode. You'll find the info on the wine we drank in this episode, links to cool things we discussed. So I'll make sure I put all the links for the websites in here. I'll put his social handles. You can hit him up on Instagram or whatever, Twitter. And until the next time, cheers to the Mavericks, the philosophers, the deep thinkers, and all you wine drinkers. It's your boy MJ. Peace.